In the 10th century, there's a guy named Farabi. The Romans call him Farabius, or Al-Farabius, because the Arabs called him Al-Farabi. Farabi realized that he had a problem. He wanted to talk about everything and anything under the sun. He wanted no limits. He was a polymath. He wanted to talk about psychology and politics. He wanted to do astronomy. He wanted to do religion. He knew he was eventually going to step on somebody's toes, and he was going to get it. So what he did was he wrote all the books he wanted to, and then he put it in his will that when he died, they would get published. And so as a result, we don't really know as much about him because during his lifetime, he spent it as like a gardener. And what he would do is he would garden at the palace, and he would listen to all the political conversations inside, pretending that he's tending to the roses or something. But in reality, he was writing it all down. He's going to ask really strange questions that maybe not many folks had asked before. So when the Persians made their empire, they did something completely unexpected, completely bizarre. When you would get conquered by Kurosh the Great or subsequent Persians, you weren't subjugated, enslaved. You became a partner of the empire. In other words, you were in a good place being conquered. It wasn't that horrible, which is strange because that's usually not how it is. In fact, Kurosh insisted on the diversity being held up. If you go to Persepolis, Takht Jamshid, if you go to Persia, I went in 2002, it's fantastic. Good luck getting a visa. It was a nightmare. I'll never try again. It's not going to happen. I give up. But if I could go again, I would definitely do it. When you get to Takht Jamshid, there's walls that show people in every kind of dress imaginable because it's a celebration of the nations. The Romans erected a monument to the massacre of the Dacians. I'm pretty sure that in Rome there is the only monument commemorating genocide. It's still there. You can go see it. It's in your art textbook. Your art history textbook, they show you the bottom parts. They never show you the top because the bottom parts of the tower show the Roman army getting together to go, and everybody's excited about that. At the top, it shows the genocide. The Arabs are like the Persians. They didn't reject the different cultures. They didn't reject the different religions. They embraced them and they accepted them. And they said, yeah, cool, keep doing your thing. If you want to convert, do it. In other words, this wasn't a forced empire like so many empires in our history. Al-Farabi asks a question, though, that throws everybody off. Because, so, if I say you're tolerant, that doesn't mean you love the other guy. We should be a tolerant society. That's a really low bar, right? Tolerant is, yeah, the world would be better if you weren't here, but I guess I'll tolerate you. That's not especially amazing when a person says, I'm tolerant of others. What I think would be really amazing is if you said, I really love others. That's a different level. And Al-Farabi asks that question, and he does it in a way that makes everybody uncomfortable. So the first two names of God, God has 99 names, Rahman Rahim, the beneficent and the merciful. And it's pure mercy, it's not human mercy, right? Where you surrender to me and I'm like, I could kill you, but I guess I won't. Not that, it's pure mercy. The 50th name is Al-Haq, which means the truth. Al-Farabi asks the most annoying question ever. If God is beneficent and he's merciful, then why on earth are only 20% of the world's population Christians, Jews, and Muslims? Because in Islam, right, it's built in that Christians, Jews, and Muslims can get to heaven. In fact, they expanded it to include Zoroastrians. What about the other 80%? Did God set them up to fail? It's not their fault that they don't know about the three Abrahamic religions. So is God condemning them to all eternity in hell? This is why he couldn't publish while he was alive. And then he goes, I have no choice but to believe that God gave Hindus Hinduism, and God gave Zoroastrians Zoroastrianism, and God gave Buddhists Buddhism. But if God is al-Haq, if he's the truth, he can't possibly have lied to them. Therefore, every religion must have access to heaven. Therefore, every religion should get equal respect. In fact, he went one step further and said, when you think about it then, the only way to truly know God would be to know every religion. He starts a whole movement. The Sufis go, oh wow, that's amazing. No bounds on what we can study. We can go learn yoga from India and bring it back. Al-Farabi wasn't just a polymath, he was a genius. And the way I can be certain in that statement was because of the following. So there's another Persian, his name is Ibn Sina. Ibn Sina says to us that I read Aristotle 40 times. Now, he didn't read Aristotle 40 times. We actually don't know how many times he read him. I read Aristotle 40 times was an idiom. It meant I memorized Aristotle word for word. When he said I read Aristotle 40 times, what he meant was, you can tell me the politics, page 5, 3rd chapter, and he could tell it to you word for word. He had the text memorized in his head. He said, after saying this, I don't know what it says. I'm sure there's some incredible genius here. I can't tap into it. The words don't make sense. The reason the words didn't make sense was they were idiomatic. That is to say, Aristotle taught in idioms. Well, he taught in idioms that by the 1st century AD were now 1,000 years old. And even the Greeks didn't know those idioms. So it wasn't like the Arabs could go to the Greeks and go, dude, what does this idiom mean? Because the language had evolved and those idioms were forgotten. So whether you read it in the original Greek or you read it in Al-Kindi's translation, either way you still didn't know what the idioms meant. Nobody did. Even the Greeks couldn't read Aristotle. And so they're stumped. They don't know what to do. And Ibn Sina goes, I know there's a genius in here. I got to tap into it. How do I tap into it? One day he's in the book section of the bazaar, and he passes by a book. And it says, it's written by Farabi. It says, Al-Farabi's idiomatic translation of Aristotle. Al-Farabi would read an idiom, try to guess what it meant. He'd plug it in, see if it worked. If it didn't work, he'd come back, try a different one. And he kept doing this until he decoded the idioms. And he realized what each idiom meant. And now you could know Aristotle and what he was saying. Ibn Sina reads this, figures out what the idioms are. He already has the text memorized. Ibn Sina suddenly, instantly knows Aristotle. And he goes nuts. What he realizes is that Aristotle is on to something about the nature of the universe. So, Aristotle says, so I guess I have to tell you what Plato says. Plato says that there's 3 realities. There's the reality we experience. So this floor, that wall, the chair, my suit, me. But that's not the real. The realer real is what's in my head. So my imagination of a chair is realer than an actual chair. My understanding of the wall is better than the actual wall. And he goes, but that's not the real either. Reality exists in a plane of existence that he calls the forms, or the idios. And so what happens is, if I'm going to make a chair, my mind reaches up into the idios, grabs the true chair, brings it into my head, but it's a copy. Copy is never as good as the original. And then my hands take the copy in my head and make a physical copy. So the chair, that chair, is a copy of the real thing. Aristotle reads this and goes, oh my God, what a bunch of nonsense. What even is that? It's nonsensical. Aristotle says, no, the chair is a collection of essences. This chair is black, so it has black essence. It's plastic, so it has plastic essence. It's shaped in a specific way. It has chair essence. That a thing is a series of essences. Ibn Sina goes, those essences are actually information. For example, there might be a scratch on that chair. And then the shape of the chair itself is information. And the molecular construction, he didn't have the concept of molecules, but they did have the concept of atoms. The construction, the material in there, that's also information. But he takes it one step further. He goes, so when that chair was originally made, it was not perfect, but it was close to perfect because it probably didn't have any scratches on it. It didn't have any damage. It didn't have any wear and tear on it. But then, as time goes by, more information is added to the chair because it gets bumped and it gets scratched. In other words, there's a relationship between information and time. Take me, for example. When I was born, I was a lot easier to describe, in part because I was a lot smaller. But also I had fewer scars, and there was a lot less information in my head. So the description of me was really easy. But as time goes forward, the description of me becomes more and more complicated. Until finally, I die, and my cells break apart and decay back into the earth. The description of me becomes extraordinarily complicated at that point. In other words, as time goes by, the universe increases the amount of information. And then he goes, oh, wow. What if we ran the clock backwards? So instead of us thinking about the future where there's more information, if we go back, there's less and less information. And he goes, okay, so at some point, we reach a moment where there's the minimum amount of information necessary for the universe itself to unravel from that moment. He calls that point in time and that information packet necessary being. In other words, 1,000 years ago, Ibn Sina described Big Bang and singularities and entropy